what are the problems that we think the consumer would like to see solved? So if you think about the number one pain point, right? And we think about mobile commerce, mobile payments in particular, what's the number one pain point that these solutions will either eliminate, solve, mitigate for consumers?
So I'll start, or try to start. You guys hear me? Okay. Is this on?
It's on now. Okay, cool. So it's a really tricky question, a really tricky problem, and here's why. Consumers really don't know what they want or they need. It's really a function of technology and how we are all dealing with and interacting with technology now. You know, 5 years ago or more, did you know that you couldn't live life without your iPhone? Most of us probably at the time would have said, yeah, you know, iPhone what? But packaged, technology packaged in the way in which it was there and in other places, suddenly becomes something that delights you, and then you realize you can't live without it. And I think that is one of the most tricky parts of this transformation that technology overall, and certainly mobility at the heart of it, is doing. And
great reframing of the question. So let me reframe the question. Okay. What will consumers learn next year or 3 years from now that they didn't know they needed and then can't live without?
Okay. So with that reframed question, I'll say, look, we've got a lot of research, back to the point of where our consumers going, and I think some of the things that shine through is that there is an expectation, a pretty high expectation amongst consumers generally, that technology is going to help them become a savvier shopper. Okay. So I think this is an important area. So whether you are a deal hunter or you are just a soccer mom or dad, a variety of different sort of segmentations, this is a very long tail issue now, right? It probably has been for a while. I think the ability to save time, in particular, the ability to know that deals are not missed, or that products that you've been perhaps searching for are available, or maybe you didn't even know about that you had the opportunity to discover, are really, really important from the consumer perspective. So that would be my stay on that.
Great. Let's hear from others. Yes, Hendrix.
Yeah, so I was going to say the same thing at the beginning. Consumers don't know. I think that's absolutely right. I think a couple of pieces of that payments work, right? Payments aren't broken, right? I can pay with cash or a check or a card already. There's nothing wrong with that. And so generally speaking, I don't think consumers know they have a pain point until it gets solved, right? So I didn't know that using a map in my car, writing down directions was a pain point until I was able to use Google Maps and it could tell me how to get there. Then I realized, well, that was a real big pain, and this is an awful lot easier, right? So it's about transforming the whole experience, and then consumers realize that this is a better experience, an easier way to live their lives than the way they lived before, and mobile is an enabler for that.
Okay, very good, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big component will also be personalization. So you start to see personalization, with things like Amazon.com and recommendations and those things. Imagine bringing that into the physical world where, today most retailers, when you walk in the door, they really don't know who you are. It's different than the online world. In the online world, you come in, you start searching for stuff, they get to know what you're shopping for, then you log in, now they know who you are and your payment history. When I walk into, Banana Republic, they have no idea who I am when I walk in there in the mall, right? So the ability to be able to use mobile and mobile technology to personalize that experience in the physical world, I think is going to be something that people realize they can't live without. When you walk in and they know who you are, they know what you bought, they know what to recommend you, and it's all driven through mobile technology.
Great answers. Any other pain points that anyone in the audience would add to that great list? Any others? Yes.
My pain point, more as a merchant than as a consumer, is, why should I pay 3.8% to American Express? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And why should I pay 30 cents for PayPal for a transaction?
What was remarkable about that, I was in Boston the last few days, and the fellow driving the car pulls out his smartphone, and so I'm saying, oh, you're using Square. No, I've moved on from Square. For that very reason. And I followed, I conducted a quick interview, tell me why. And he had several reasons, and again, I was able to articulate them. And the other thing that's happening in the space is, as was mentioned, the number of options are just exploding. So if you can imagine, again, a driver moving on from Square, and Square's been around, what, all of a year, or 2 years, so it's remarkable.
Yeah, the one thing I might add, and because we have a very large merchant base, of course, the cost of acceptance is always an issue, and it's a huge issue, right? But one thing I might add, just as some of this technology changes, is that the lines between, the lines between card not present and card present are going to blur. The fact of the matter is, as accounts really do move to the cloud, and some of these experiences that happen, we've talked about, as those things happen, the lines between sort of the virtual world and the physical world, and some of the pricing and the rubric that we've operated within are going to have to change. I think that's one thing that you can almost expect that type of change coming. But what exactly it looks like and how those economics work, no one knows yet. But that's going to be an interesting change for the industry, and certainly for the merchant and the issuing community.
Yeah, that's something I've heard mentioned a number of times lately, is kind of a person present or a device present as opposed to a card present or not present. I don't know if any of you use Level Up, but it always is entertaining to me that a Level Up transaction, I'm at the point of sale, my device is at the point of sale, and my card is in fact in my wallet at the point of sale, and yet it processes as a card not present transaction, right? That's really not right, and the merchant's not getting hit in that transaction because of how Level Up's model works. But that is a great example of where card not present is no longer applicable to that kind of transaction. And the model does need to evolve, and very much would speak to your pain point.
So I've got one more general question, then we'll open it up to the audience. I'm curious, if you could look back over 2012, curious what you think was the most significant development in this in-commerce space. And then as you look ahead, what do you see on the horizon for 2013, and especially what in your opinion, could be one of the most significant developments, potentially disruptive in 2013? So let's start with 2012. What in your opinion, in this timeline that we acknowledge may span a decade or more, what happened in 2012 that sort of shook things up?
Apple didn't include NFC in the new
That's right.
Well, and I mean, to add on to that,
So it was a non-event.
well, the non-event though
Yeah.
actually triggered an explosion of usage of 2D barcode, right? So you're seeing a lot of applications come out that leverage that technology because, for a variety of reasons, whether it's payments or information or whatever. But there's been an explosion in that technology. I don't know how long-lived it will be, but certainly it has filled the gap in the meantime while we're trying to get NFC up and running.
So my take on it would be, I don't know that there was a grand slam big game changer in 12. And that might sound depressing, but what I would say is that, and I think Ginger made the point, these things will take some time before you really do see some bigger sort of game changers. What is good news, I think, when I sort of reflect back on 12 is, I think you saw a maturing and a better packaging of some of this technology and getting down to real consumer problems and starting to get focused. Not there yet. There's a ton of there's a ton of VC activity and startups, and a lot of it, as you can imagine, is technology trying to find a problem. But I do think that we're starting to see consumer experiences, right, delivered through mobile technology, shopping and payment, and some friction getting taken out that is important. So I would say that it's not necessarily one event, but I think that we're starting to see movement collectively in a direction where this stuff is making its way to consumers, not in some grand slam sort of game over type of way, but certainly in a diverse set of ways in which consumers, I think, are starting to really adopt and use some of the capability and use it to their advantage.
Okay. How about 2013? What are you anticipating, either on the technology side, the platform side, incumbents, big players? What do you think could shape things up in 2013? And more importantly, accelerate the speed at which all of these developments are taking hold in the marketplace. Any thoughts, speculation?
Well, I mean, I might build on what Mark said. I think the inherent challenges with NFC, and we do a lot of work in contactless, we do a bunch of work in QR and barcode. I think the fact that QR and barcode is available to consumers and can be used as a great way to deliver a consumer experience, right, without some of the technology hurdles or some of the inherent sort of kind of business and competitive aspects, I think is a really good thing. I think that I would say for 13, I think my expectation would be that we will see a larger adoption to the point that was made. And I think that that will be a really good thing. I mean, to the extent Passbook is good, from an Apple perspective, I think that there's lots of opportunity for it and other types of implementations, apps from retailers to get better and better. So my expectation would be that I think that the kinds of shopping and checkout experiences that we're just starting to see the front edge of, I think we'll see more of that, and so that would be my expectation of what to look for as opposed to trying to predict, one particular game over thing that's going to happen.
Yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball. I would really like to know what's going to happen this year. But I'm going to follow on Dom's point. I think the 2013 year will see a lot of consumer education and really kind of awareness of what's happening in mobile. Over the history of the iTunes store, there's been 40 billion apps downloaded. Half of those were downloaded last year, right? So that just shows you the curve on how many people have the devices and are now using them for a lot more, right? The smartphone adoption crossed the halfway point last year, right? So you have more consumers with a computer in their hands and they can do a lot more with it. Starbucks is out there with their mobile application. People are getting comfortable using that at Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, Square's now out there. They're getting more comfortable with the idea that more things can happen away from your traditional point of sale, traditional wallet. And I think 13, you're going to see that start to happen more. And my guess is by the end of 13, you're going to be seeing more consumers saying, hey, bank, hey, merchant, why can't I use my mobile device to do these things? I think we'll start to see more of that. It won't just be your early adopters. It will start being, more mainstream consumers.
Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the big constituency that I don't think we've seen a lot of things come to market yet is really the big financial institutions. When Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Chase rolls out their mobile wallet or whatever it is that they intend to do, that's going to have a big impact on the market. And we just don't know when that's going to be or what technology they're going to choose to do that. But that has the potential to be fairly disruptive. Maybe not disruptive, but certainly pushing the market forward.
All right, great. Well, let's open it up to questions from the audience. I believe we have one in the back.
Yes, regarding NFC, can you elaborate a little bit about what countries may adopt that or what parts of the country and how that looks, and then security issues around that going forward?
And then I'm going to ask the panel, some of these questions are quite complex and we could spend the rest of the evening talking about them, so I'll ask the panel to answer concisely, and then we'll have a follow-on discussion following the break as well. So we'll try and get as many questions in as we can. Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take a shot. Looks like it's me, but process of elimination. So what I would say is I think for NFC, I think the place where, to the extent it's going to reach any level of critical mass, I think the U.S. is probably a likely spot, just in terms of some of the devices, the level of deployment that's happened. I would tell you that if MCX, which is sort of the merchant consortium, kind of moves in the direction and is able to actually start to deploy some things, I think that what you could expect is that QR code, barcode-based forms of payment will probably eclipse that or protract any takeoff really of NFC. Relative to the security, there's certainly been press in and around, NFC and things of that nature, but I would tell you that the technology itself is secure. And I want to be clear, it's not like I'm saying, it's over and done. Every form of security and technology always has to be updated, right? We get better, the bad guys get better. We get better, the bad guys get better. That's life, right, in the security space. But I would say, the capability of having, a secure element on the edge of the network and the ability to, encrypt that data, as well as the ability to kind of even get into ways to tokenize, right, which we're doing a lot of. There's a number of measures and countermeasures there that make it a very safe technology.
All right, great. In the back over there?
Well,
Oh, actually, go ahead.
kind of a follow-on question regarding NFC. There's thoughts that when Apple finally does, and they didn't do it because they weren't ready to, kind of has their own walled-off garden on payments where no one else is invited to the party, instead of excluding your kind of trillies up in front. Likelihood of that, I mean, alternatives, I mean, it's they have a history trying to want to control the whole thing. So they have a whole lot of credit cards, a whole lot of information, a whole lot of ways to make payments. AT&T does. It's also been mentioned as well, they have a whole lot of accounts. The fracturing of it, if Apple tries to come out with something completely proprietary, just to them that others are invited to, but the chances of that, what does that do to the industry?
I'll start up here, and these guys are going to jump in, I'm sure. But what I would say is, look, I don't. First of all, I would tell you, Apple has no interest in becoming a payment company or a bank. What they are interested in, and we all see and enjoy this, is they're very focused on taking friction out and creating really a delightful, magical experience, right? And so if that means that there's the ability to enable payment by virtue of your Apple ID, right, and just be able to kind of one click and pay, absolutely see that happening. But creating a walled garden where they sort of act and look like a bank is really not of interest to them. A company with their multiples and being a technology company, while they can certainly and will innovate in those areas, there's not really any interest in becoming a bank and looking like a bank.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that Apple controls a quarter to a third of the handset market in the U.S., so they can't control everything. I think whatever new technology they come out with. What they can do, however, Apple is the master of the experience, right? They can come out with something that is such a compelling experience that the rest of the market may have to follow, right? That, I think, is what you have to look at with Apple. And I don't think they want to be a bank. They don't want to own the payments. They don't want to do that. They want to have a compelling experience that makes people buy more of their devices and more of their apps, right? And if they can come up with a way to do that, that makes the payment seamless in the background, that everybody else wants to buy into and maybe buy the technology from them, then Apple will win.
I had a question, probably just for Tom, because it's related to issuing and acquiring, and with regards to the EMV deadlines that are coming up in April, you've got issuers that are going to have to reissue cards to every single one of their cardholders. You've got merchants who are going to have to upgrade their point of sale to be able to accept, these new kinds of cards. Do you think in your opinion, that the investment at just about every level of the value chain in the process from the payment side is going to have to make an EMV, is going to displace or slow down the acceptance of mobile? And then I have another question about interchange.
Okay, we'll do one and then move on.
Multi-part questions. So EMV. Firstly, I would tell you that this is, from a security perspective, it makes a lot of sense, right? There's advantages that have been proven in other regions, virtually every other market around the world, with the exception of the U.S., of moving to a chip-based payment as opposed to magnetic stripe. Magnetic stripe technology is 40 years old now, and we created a ton of surrounds to make it more secure. But the reality is, it's 40-year-old technology, and it probably can be said that the time has come, right, to move to a much more up-to-date technology. That said, the financial institutions are trying to work their way through that business model and really come to the justification of how do I reissue, right, and the costs associated with that, and that's not easy. Merchants doing the same. So I think we have here sort of the classic sort of thing that happens in the payment ecosystem of the networks looking to move the whole industry forward, as opposed to saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There are issues there. So deadlines have been put out there, and it'll be a herd mentality, right, where on both sides, issuer and merchant, there's a lot of work and investment. We're certainly making a lot of it to get ready on or about those dates. Now, whether it's going to slow things down, I really don't think so. I think to the extent, some of the value-added services and the experiences that we've talked about here that are tied to mobile, right, the mobile device and the interactivity of that, cards can't do that, right? I mean, to the extent your card is not smart, right, but your mobile device is. And tying payment into what would be that part of that shopping journey, right, and that frictionless payment is where I think these things are on sort of separate timelines and trajectories.
Good. Got a question up here.
Each of your companies deals with hundreds, if not thousands, of financial institutions. And in every single case, all but 25 of them are smaller than the top 25 national banks that might be developing their own payment mechanisms. What do you tell the small credit unions, the small state banks, the local banks? Is it just, hey, game over, shut your doors and go home? Or what do they do? How do they adapt to emerging mobile payments technologies?
Andrew, you want to take that?
Sure, I'll start with that one. Yeah, we do have thousands of financial institutions, from the largest to some of the smallest.
She's going to give you her job description.
Yeah, no, and that's in my role, that's something that I've actually given a lot of thought to, and I think that what you have to keep in mind is that there are going to be a lot of different solutions out there for a long time, right? And so it's not game over, right? No bank's going out of business because of mobile payments. What they have to figure out is how they want to play. So there will be banks, from the largest to the smallest, who will partner with one of those 300 startups, or Google, or PayPal, or whoever else, right? They'll partner with one or more of those. They might build something on their own into their own banking application. They may do something else. I think there's going to be a different answer for every bank depending on their size, their client type, their product set, and their market, right? So I think there's not a one-size-fits-all on this. B of A may come out with their very own thing and that'll be successful, and the local credit union may do something else entirely, partnering with other providers, and that'll be very successful as well. I think that there's lots of possibilities here and a different answer for every player in the space.
Totally agree. So this technology flattens the world. If you are a community bank, you've got to get in this game and get dirty and understand what's going on and be looking for where those customer experiences are. That you can engage your current customers as well as future customers and be in this game. If you're sitting it out waiting to find out what the big guys are going to do and then just kind of follow, you may be so behind the curve that indeed there will be some winners and some losers, right? There will be some share shift here. So as we kind of work with our community banks and the like, this is about the open interfaces and how do we provide them with a platform where they can create experiences on top that really kind of get to that user experience, right? The UI and those elements, but be able to leverage really mobile forward technologies that are not going to have the capital to create and invest in their own large implementations of these. It's just not the way that part of the world works.
And by the way, the large banks are also partnering, right? B of A is partnered. Citi's partnered with Google Wallet, US Bank's out there with Visa. I mean, they're all partnering as well. It's not just the small ones that will have to play with the third-party providers. They're all going to have to at some level.
I want to build on that question with Mark, and then maybe a question for Mark. Mark, I'm curious, as you think about the implications of these developments, not just for those in the value chain, but for others, brands, retailers, etc. How do you see these developments affecting others outside of the payment value chain? And in particular, if they stand on the sidelines and don't begin to experiment and capitalize on these capabilities, what's at risk for them as well?
Sure. So, primarily for, say, merchants, it's really about getting paid and consumer acceptance. And so most of the merchants that we talk to, as long as we can make the technology integration seamless, they are relatively indifferent to the payment type, unless they're a really large retailer like the Walmarts, the Sears, where interchange and payment type makes a big difference to their cost structure. So particularly for the large merchants, this is a big deal. It has an opportunity to fundamentally change their customer experience as well as their cost structure. So in fact, we mentioned NCX, a lot of the large merchants are banding together to work on their own payment network around this. So they're fully involved.
What about these mobile concierge capabilities you alluded to? Or do you see merchants and restaurants clamoring for these things, or is it being forced on them?
I think the large ones recognize that in order to remain competitive over the long haul, they have to fundamentally change their customer experience. Whether you're a restaurant or a retailer, or you're a travel company, customers start to expect a certain experience, and then with the customer experience research that we've done, one of our sayings inside of NCR is customers aren't loyal to brands anymore. They're loyal to experiences. And if they find a better experience somewhere else, they're going to move to that, regardless of whose name is on the label. So we think the companies that invest in the right places in the experience and bring mobility as a key piece into that are going to be the long-term winners.
I might just add very quickly and say, totally agree with the points. I mean, there's research and quite a bit of it out there that suggests, more than 80% of the time, all of us as consumers, we're making our shopping decisions, we're looking at products before we even get to the physical store, right? So to the point of experiences, this is about how do you connect with the customer and keep a dialogue going, before as well as after what used to be the checkout.
Go ahead.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, just first I wanted to say thanks for a great quality of panel. You really are all bringing great expertise. And Phil, your slides framed up a very nice framework. We've had a very nice big picture view of the ecosystem, but we haven't really kind of spelled out along the value chain. And I'm just wondering if you all think out the next 48 months, and I'm going to use that number rather than the usual 3-month or 5-year business plan kind of view that we all work with. So you think 48 months from now, who's getting to, picking up what you were just talking about, it sounds like, well, this rising tide will raise all boats. But earnings per share, whose boat is going to raise proportionally more than anybody else's? Who are the winners over the next 4 years because of mobile payments? Disproportionate winners in the whole
the big
value chain.
winners.
Compared to, relative to, because the big guys are already big, but they may grow a little bit. Little guys may grow a lot. And I'm looking for the disproportionate, who's going to get more than their fair share of the game.
I will point out, think about what AdWords did for Google 10 years ago. So if we think about the potential for these capabilities to create another Google, and maybe it's going to multiply Google as well, but who do you see potentially taking off as a result of these developments?
So I might jump in here and just say, I think...
in addition to your own company.
I'm not going to say that. We've got a lot of our customers in the audience, so that's probably a bad answer, although it did cross my mind. These guys too. It would have been the safe answer, right? Technology suppliers. But I think providers of ad platforms, I think, have a very, very bright future in here. If you think about Google's world today, right? Just a juggernaut of growth, but relegated to what was formerly the online world, right? The online world is completely changing. Online is everywhere. Your remote control example, right? I used to use a mouse to click around the digital landscape. Now I use my device and I'm everywhere. So my ability to be served an ad, particularly advantaged by geolocation, knowing something about me, back to Phil's point of the consumer in the middle. Companies that can really capture and capitalize on that to deliver the right offer, right, at the right time in the right place, now in much greater market share, or addressable market, I should say, to go after, right? Google's world in e-commerce, if you will, is here, right? The physical world, proximity payments, is, I don't know, 10 times that. I forget what the stats were exactly. So the pool of revenue, addressable revenue and profit around the advertising world is significant.
Yeah, I would add to that, very closely related to that, big data companies, right? Companies that can go in and look at your transaction history, look at your behavior patterns, and help institutions create those, that personalization that I was talking about earlier, and can help drive, that differentiated customer experience. Those are the types of companies that I think have got a lot of opportunity ahead.
So I know this isn't really where you were going with the question, but I'm going to say the consumer. And I'm going to say the consumer because I, as a consumer, I hate to shop, right? I hate to deal with my finances. That's all kind of a hassle. Mobile makes it easy for me to do all of that. You start to personalize, I can start to target, I save money, I get better information, I do it faster, I'm back off doing my own thing with my family and my friends without having to worry about all this extra hassle that existed in my life before. So I'm going to say the consumer gets a lot of value out of the improvements in the mobile space.
Let's see. Do we have time for one more question? Yes. Andrew, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Okay, I'm going to ask a really complicated question, but I'll ask it in an open-ended way so you can answer it however you like. So, questions about data.
Can you frame it as yes, no?
Yeah. So the question's about data. And so data is in your company's name, Tom. And so there's a lot of very valuable data that comes out of a payment transaction, even out of a card-based payment transaction. When you make it a mobile wallet, there's some other new types of data that comes. When we talked about personalization, data is the key to personalization. But there are different stakeholders that are all claiming that they own the data or want to protect their ownership of the data. Retailers own their data. Banks own their data. Consumers say, wait a minute, I own my privacy, so I own my own data. I'd like each of you to comment about the issues related to data and how it gets monetized and the whole ownership issue. And whatever thoughts you'd like to make about looking at a year or two ahead, the data in this mobile payments.
In 30 seconds or less. Right?
That's not a yes, or I was going to go for a yes. So what I would tell you is this is an area that we are very focused on. Also, I think due to our heritage, pretty comfortable navigating these waters. Because one thing's for sure, we don't own the data. We're custodians of it for our customers, whether they be financial institutions or merchants. I think ultimately, the ultimate answer here is, this is about the consumer owning their own data, meaning even if that data is used in a very permission-based way, right, and it's got to be transparent. Ultimately, if it's used in a way that is offensive, you may lose that customer forever, right? So financial institutions, merchants, or technology suppliers who are given the ability to tap into some element of that to deliver a better or great experience, I've got to move very carefully in this space because of that issue.
So custodian is a great term. How do you think, what do you think companies must do in order to avoid some of the pitfalls, but also potentially capitalize on the data aspect as well?
Sure. Well, I mean, first and foremost is, you have to secure the data. That's kind of a given. But I think you're seeing increasingly companies ask the consumer for permission to use it as well. And so I think it's going to be incumbent upon more and more institutions to have a very personal, even in the digital world, a personalized relationship where they understand what they can and can't do with the customer's data. And to some degree, I think as an industry, we probably haven't articulated well enough what the benefits of sharing that data are to the consumer. Because most of what the consumer hears is, security breaches and Facebook screwed up their privacy policy again. And so there's a lot of negative press, but there's also a lot of positive to be gained. So I think there's an education challenge that, particularly in the retail space, they need to think about.
I think you guys have covered it. I'm not sure I need to add anything there.
I guess the question I would leave the audience with is, who are you going to trust for that data? And perhaps given our experience with the big companies and the ways in which they handle this most sacred of assets, what will either encourage or force them to do this? So I'm moderating a panel on personalization at Big Om Structured Data Conference in March, so I'm looking forward to thinking about this. I think it's a very, very complex issue, but it's really at the heart of a lot of opportunities, but also risk for the whole industry as well. Well, please join me in thanking the panelists.